Good morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock, actually a little after 10. I apologize for that. The nice weather we have today made me a little late, so I apologize. But welcome to today's third part to our Dealing with Dementia series for 2021. Today we're going to be talking about some tips for the holiday time. We like to call it our Holiday Survival Guide. And I am Christine Drasher. I'm your host today. I'm sure many of you were on our other two parts, so I don't want to talk or spend too much time talking about Emerald Crest. But Emerald Crest is the sponsor of today's presentation, along with the other parts of the series. And we have 4 locations of memory care in the Twin Cities: Burnsville, Minnetonka, Shakopee, and Victoria. And we are one of the most long-standing memory cares in Minnesota, with over 20 years of providing exceptional memory care to those that need that 24-hour care, but don't quite need that nursing home, but need a good alternative to it. And we're very proud of our environment, which you can see there is more of a home setting. We have 12 people to a house. And we have different levels of dementia care. So we call it our staging model, where we actually have multiple houses on a campus, and we have one stage that is for the earlier or early mid-stage individuals, another house that is for middle stage, and another house that is for more of the later stage. And the reason we do that is so that we can really provide the best activities for those individuals, so we have the most success. And a big part of that is our OT model, which Jenny will talk a little bit today, who is our presenter. And then it also is a really great way to have our residents feel more comfortable with others that are very familiar or similar to them at their levels. So there's a lot more engagement and socialization for the residents within the house. So there's some more information about Emerald Crest. I don't want to go too much into it because I know we're running a little late here, but I also want to mention that we are part of CASIA, which is a nonprofit organization here in Minnesota that has a legacy with Augustana Care and Elam. They merged a couple of years ago and created CASIA. You can see again our 4 locations there where they're located, and then Liz is our admissions director. And if you're interested in signing up a tour, her information is right there. All right, so let's get started here with introducing our speakers. So today's speaker is Jenny Lavoie. She did another one of our parts of this series, so you might be familiar with her. But she has over 18 years of experience at Emerald Crest working with our individuals with dementia. As an occupational therapist, she works very closely with our housing director, our nurse, and our caregivers, along with the families, to really focus on the residents and identify what challenges or gaps that they may have with their function. She develops strategies and techniques to help fill those gaps, and the goal is really to maximize that resident's ability and level of function. Jenny spends a lot of time doing cognitive assessments, behavior management, training our staff, and finding opportunities for the residents to participate in daily care and meaningful activities. And the goal with us is to promote success and self-worth. So I am going to mute myself and have Jenny take over here. So let's welcome Jenny to the presentation.
Thank you, Christine. Good morning, everybody. Like Christine said, our topic today is going to be, it's called the Holiday Survival Guide, Practical Tips for Caregivers. Some of this information, if you've been on the previous sessions, especially the last one, might be review, but what we'd like to talk about today is how that information really ties in a lot to the holiday times and things to consider when going through the holidays with your loved one with dementia. So some of the main points that we're going to cover today here, you'll see the objectives. The first, again, is just to briefly review what is dementia and the changes that occur through the progression of the disorder. Also recognizing the importance of structure in the lives of persons with dementia. And then, like I said, kind of tying it into what do we need to understand with considerations and strategies as they apply to the holidays for persons with dementia. So like many of our sessions before, I'm not sure the audience we have today, where you're coming from, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So if we could start the session with this question: what comes to mind when you think of the word dementia? And if you want to just take a few minutes and jot your answers down in the chat button. So I'm seeing a lot of kind of similar answers. The biggest one I saw, of course, was memory loss. And usually when I ask this question, that is kind of the number one thing that I see people saying or thinking of. And it's absolutely right. It involves memory loss. But I think when I go through these sessions, the biggest thing that I want to emphasize with dementia is it's memory loss, but it also involves changes in many additional skills that really contribute to the person's thinking or overall cognitive process, meaning there's a lot more going on with cognitive skills that are being impacted than just the memory loss. So this next slide here, normal forgetting versus dementia. It seems like every time I give a talk, I always have somebody come to me and they say, they always seem a little concerned because maybe just like today, it's snowing out, people maybe were late in getting to where they needed to go, kind of stressful morning. And I'll have someone say to me, oh my gosh, do I have dementia? I misplaced my keys this morning. It took me 20 minutes to find them. And we kind of chuckle about that. And what I say to that person is, no, not necessarily. There is normal forgetting. It happens to all of us. Now, if you weren't able to retrace your steps and find those keys after a certain amount of time, then there might be a little bit of need for worry. Or if you find the keys were placed in the refrigerator or some odd place like that, yeah, then maybe I'd start to question some things. But this slide here, if you take a look at it, there is normal forgetting and there is a true dementia. So for many of us, and I'm sure you all can think of a time in your life where you've had some normal forgetting. It's very sporadic. It doesn't happen every single day. It usually, when it's normal forgetting, occurs with times of stress and fatigue. I always think back to my years in college, where you get to the end of a semester and you have a week of finals and you're getting very little sleep. You're maybe not eating like you normally would. You're not getting exercise like you would. And I just remember being very, very stressed, very tired, and just not thinking as clearly. I was forgetting more things. But as that week went on, I got through my finals, everything was okay. Then I was feeling more at my baseline, thinking clearly again. And that happens to all of us. You can think of a time in your own life, I'm sure. Normal forgetting doesn't affect our overall day-to-day functioning. We can still, succeed in our jobs, take care of our home, our children, our normal day-to-day functions we can still do. Now, someone with a true dementia that's also actually been diagnosed, it's constant. It's not just here and there, times of stress. It's every single day from the time that they wake up in the morning to the time that they go to bed at night. And it does affect their overall day-to-day functioning. I had a gentleman that I was working with in the clinic years ago, and he was brought in by his wife because he was maybe upper 50s, lower 60s, and he's working at a company very similar to 3M. He worked at a computer, went to his cubicle every day, and one day coworkers noticed that he forgot how to turn on his computer monitor, something that he's done every day of his life for the last 30 years or so that he's worked at his job. The supervisor was alerted to this, and then it was brought up to his wife that maybe he should go to the doctor. They did that, and he was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, and he ended up having to take an early retirement because he wasn't able to effectively do the job functions, do the day to day. And I'm sure there was a lot more going on at home that maybe the wife didn't even realize that she was compensating for. But that's kind of when you're looking at normal forgetting versus dementia, that's the difference there. So briefly, let's look at the definition of dementia. I asked you kind of what came to mind. And really when you define it, I give a real general term that it's a group of symptoms that affect overall thinking skills or cognitive skills. And usually when somebody is diagnosed with a dementia, it doesn't just start out right away with, oh, they can't groom themselves, they can't toilet themselves. It usually in the early stages starts out with more of those higher level skills, because a lot of the people are still living in their own home or living, somewhere in the community. And so it's more what are called IADLs, instrumental activities of daily living, where they're having trouble completing those completely or safely. And what I mean by that is managing their personal affairs, such as their finances, making decisions, organizing their job, the day-to-day. Often that's the first sign. Maybe the kids are starting to notice that they're not balancing their checkbook, they're forgetting to pay bills, organizing thew house. Mom was always very, very organized, and they come over now and everything is very disheveled, out of place. And that's the kind of thing that you're talking about. When somebody is first diagnosed with dementia, that's kind of the first signs, is those higher level skills. And of course, the memory loss is really what caregivers tend to notice first, because why is that? It's easily recognized because it affects others, and it's more measurable, meaning if they always remembered birthdays, they were, remembering their important appointments every week, anniversaries, and now they're forgetting those things. A lot of times family can pick up on that a lot easier than maybe the other cognitive skills that are now being affected, decision making, problem solving, all of that. So that's usually what's noticed first. And then, like we've talked about before, as that dementia progresses into more of the middle stages, early to middle stages, that's when they start to have the problems with being able to just complete their daily cares. So they're dressing, they're grooming, they're bathing. It gets to the point where a person really can't effectively and safely complete even those basic cares without some kind of 24-hour supervision. So those with dementia, they begin to have increasing difficulties with what's called cognition. And what is cognition? Oh, that's that set of skills that work in conjunction with each other, allowing us to think. So if Christine goes to the next slide, I've used this a lot in other sessions. I call this the wheel of cognition. And the idea behind this is I'm trying to demonstrate to you that there's so much more being affected when somebody has dementia than just memory. You see memory on this wheel, but look at all the other cognitive skills. And this isn't even probably the complete list, but when somebody has dementia, their orientation to time, place, person starts to become affected. Initiating, if they don't have somebody reminding them to get up in the morning, start to get dressed and have some breakfast, they may be in bed all day in their pajamas. Not being able to make safe decisions, judgments, recognizing problems and then being able to solve them. Their attention span, their ability to focus on tasks. As that person progresses from early, middle to late stage, that attention span becomes less and less and less, and they get highly distracted. sequencing, that's a huge one, especially as they progress into the middle stages where they don't know what comes first, second, third, fourth, in a sequence for an activity. That's why a lot of times you start to see people layering their clothes, not because they're cold, they want to wear 5 shirts. They don't know what to do after you put the shirt on, so they keep doing the same thing over and over. So like I said, you can see that this wheel of cognition, it involves all kinds of different skills that are most likely being affected at the same time when somebody has dementia diagnosis. So I've been referring kind of to the stages of dementia a little bit, and I think that's important for us again to keep in mind as we're going along today. And I always keep it, in layman's terms, and we use the term early, middle, and late stage. And it really does need to be considered. Once you get that diagnosis of, oh my gosh, my loved one has dementia, then the next thing that most healthcare providers are going to try to do is figure out, is it early, is it middle, is it late stage that they're in? And this needs to be considered when planning and providing dementia care. The reason why is because what you might recommend for somebody in the early stage as far as services, as far as resources, is going to be very different for somebody in the late stage. And also, it really needs to be considered what stage they're in when you're starting as a family member, thinking and planning for the holidays and how to get through that, safely and effectively for your loved one. So at each stage, an individual experiences changes that do a number of things. It causes gaps in their abilities. Movement through each stage results in a greater number of gaps. So as they progress through that early, middle, and late stage, there's going to be more and more gaps in their skills that we as caregivers are going to have to try to fill in or help with. The gaps begin to affect the individual's ability to manage their daily activities and routine without assistance. And then the caregiver must assist the individual in filling in those gaps. And again, depending on what stage they're at, how you help them, how you step in is going to look very, very different. So we may notice changes in a person's abilities or in their progression through the stages by a couple of key things. One of the biggest things, and I hear this from families a lot, is they start to see the person isolating a lot more. They're not wanting to leave their apartment or their room. They're kind of wanting to just keep to themselves. And, a big reason behind that is as somebody's starting to lose their skills, their communication skills, their ability to interact, their ability to complete tasks, that person, in the beginning probably has a sense that something is changing, but they just don't know why that is, or they can't put their finger on it. And it's kind of their way to kind of protect themselves. They don't want to make a mistake or mess up or say something wrong, say in front of family members or in front of other people in a group setting. So you start to see them become more inward, that isolating. Also, if somebody's changing, you might see them having more increased sleeping during the day. Again, it's a very passive activity. It's much easier for somebody to just sit in front of the TV and fall asleep in their chair. It's an easier way to deal with the cognitive changes that might be occurring. And I just brought it up, but yeah, watching lots of TV during the day. Again, active versus passive activities. It's always easier for that person with dementia as they're progressing to go to more of that passive activity. And you'll see maybe your loved one sitting and doing nothing. They don't know how to initiate activities anymore. They don't know how to maybe do the typical or common activities that maybe they once knew or what that once brought them enjoyment. So as we move along and kind of talk about the holidays, some of the things to consider, not only for the person that has dementia, but then now the person that has dementia as you're going through the holidays, is that need for routine and structure, even as you're having all these holiday events coming up, is still important for your loved one that has dementia. So when we talk structure, those with dementia, they lose the ability to plan, initiate, and complete activities on their own. Therefore, again, they need caregivers to guide them through that process, to not only plan, but help them initiate and carry through with activities. And in other words, as the caregiver of somebody with dementia, you have to work to provide that structure for them, that daily routine. So when I'm talking structure, what does it look like? Well, structure for somebody with dementia, it's having a consistent daily schedule. And it's usually created by some kind of outside source, whether it's you yourself as the caregiver, maybe taking care of somebody in the home. Maybe they go to an adult day program during the day where they provide that structure. Maybe they're in some type of memory care facility where they help to provide that structure. I mean, even think about yourself, even folks that are cognitively intact, you need a daily routine. How do you feel when maybe you're stuck at home and because you're sick or whatever? It really throws you off. Think about just the last year and a half, 2 years with the COVID pandemic and how much that's even thrown yourself off, having to isolate at home and not having that regular routine. It's been horrible for people. So it's no different for somebody with dementia. So again, thinking of trying to keep that daily schedule consistent for that person, even through the time of the holidays. You need that balance between activity and rest. So a person that has dementia needs to have that engagement, that activity, but at the same time, they also need periods of time throughout the day and evening where they can rest, not only their body, but their mind, because it really takes a lot of extra work for them to be able to engage in activities. So they need that rest. A delicate balance between stimulation and overstimulation. It's, the holidays especially, they can be very, very busy, stimulating times, lots going on and lots of people around. And the stimulation is important for those with dementia, but you got to be careful to not overstimulate because too much can really cause them anxiety, agitation. So when you talk about keeping a consistent routine or schedule for somebody with dementia, this is kind of what I see as important in a schedule for them. It's having the same activities at the same time of day, same routine, 7 days a week. Just because it's Saturday and Sunday doesn't mean that, there shouldn't be any routine or structure throughout the day. It's keeping that up 7 days a week and having kind of the same protocol or procedure for doing activities with that person with dementia. And, the biggest thing is, and I deal with this a lot at Emerald Crest and, trying to guide our caregivers in the programming and that type of thing. I would always get a comment from the caregiver that, well, we're sick of doing this activity every day or bingo or whatever. And, a lot of times I have to say to them that, again, you have to remember that for you're cognitively intact. You want a variety of activities and all kinds of different activities every day. Well, somebody with dementia, a variety is important, but it may not be as key than just having just a regular routine. If you're doing an activity, the same activity, say a couple times each week, they're not necessarily going to remember that we're doing the same activity a couple times a week. They just know that, it's 9:30 and it's time for something to occur, So those are kind of the points that I look at. This slide here, this is just an example of a daily schedule. It actually was a schedule that we used to use at Emerald Crest. It's not current scheduling, but this is just more so to give you an example from a caregiver's perspective of when you're trying to set up a routine for your loved one throughout the day. It's kind of having these key points in there. And you'll see that there's times of movement, exercise, activity, which is always good. There's a lot of music in there. There might be some reminiscing in there. And you'll also see that there's those rest times that I talked about. Very, very important to have those key times throughout your day, throughout your routine for that person with dementia. So that's just to give you an example. So why is structure important for someone with dementia? Well, because with somebody with dementia, they no longer are able to plan, like I said, and execute tasks on their own. They need somebody to structure their day. For them, if they have that routine and structure, it really helps to bring control to their world that is often chaotic as they try to, get through day by day as they're losing these cognitive skills. Having a predictable and reliable routine or structure is key. I had this lady at one of our campuses years ago, and it was interesting to watch her because every morning she would be eating breakfast at the dining room table. As soon as she was done with breakfast, she would take her plates up to the kitchen counter there and leave them for the staff. And then she would immediately walk from the dining room into the living room and sit on the couch. And she would just sit there very content, waiting. And usually we would have like an exercise group start about 9:15, 9:30. Well, if there was a day, like there are days, if the caregivers are running late, maybe there's an emergency, they got late in starting with stuff for the day. If some activity, if something didn't start to happen in that living room, kind of by that 9:30 time, not that she was able to follow the clock or anything, but she kind of knew that something was supposed to be happening. But if something didn't, you'd start to see her get up from the couch and she'd start to just kind of pace and walk the hallways of the house. And her pacing would get more and more and more as that routine was not happening. So I always think about that lady because it was a perfect example of how she was seeking out that structure, that routine, even though that she did not know that it was exercise that was supposed to start. She knew something was supposed to happen in that living room after the breakfast meal. And then you to just watch what would happen as it didn't was very telling. And down at the bottom here, it helps to decrease behaviors. So structure, routine, if you've got them focused and engaged in activity throughout the day, you're going to see there's going to be a lot less behaviors. There's not going to be time for pacing, wandering, asking repetitive questions because they're going to be focused on activity. So as we go along, just thinking about dementia, the stages, things that are important. As we go through the holidays, another key thing to keep in mind is how important it is to try to keep a calm environment, even through the holidays and all the activities for that person with dementia. So when I think about a calm environment and what that takes, these are all kind of things, and I often teach this and remind our caregivers of this, even in our settings at Emerald Crest. You really need to think about the interactions going on in your home or in your setting and the noise level. I always tell staff members, especially at change of shift, if you need to touch base with that new shift coming in and let them know of what was happening throughout the day, that's important, yes, but really being careful about where you're doing that. Maybe you go to a quiet part of the house or in the bedroom or somewhere out of the main area, because if there's a lot of residents around and they're seeing these interactions and hearing their interactions, a lot of times it can cause anxiety and agitation if they don't know what you're talking about, or maybe they're paranoid and they think you're talking about them. Volume of interactions. I always tell caregivers, the louder your voice gets in your interactions and your comings and goings, the louder our residents are going to get. It's going to cause more anxiety in them. This is a big one, content of interactions. And, you really got to think about this too. Even if you're caring for somebody in your own home, what you're talking about either directly to them or to somebody else in the home, you got to be careful. You don't want to be talking about the latest news story or what you saw on TV, because let's face it, everything that we hear on TV and news these days isn't real positive. And so if you're talking about the murder that happened down in Minneapolis and, oh my gosh, how could that happen? And they hear that, that's going to be very, very it's going to be very anxiety provoking for them. I had an episode years ago at one of our campuses where two caregivers were talking about the flooding that was going on down in that Shakopee area, County Road 41, that seems to flood often in the springtime. And they were talking about how hard it had been to get to work and back because all the roads were closed. So they had to take these detours. And most of our residents in Shakopee, they've lived in that area for pretty much their entire life, a lot of them. And they started to listen to this conversation that these two were having. And the one gentleman got very, very nervous and anxious and said, if the roads are closed, how am I going to get home to my family? They're going to be worried about me. And then, everybody was in the dining room. So some of the other ladies said, well, I live in Shakopee too. How am I going to get home to my loved ones? And it just started kind of a frenzy between some of our residents, just very, very nervous, agitated, anxious about this whole conversation that the caregivers were having. So it's really important that you pick and choose what you're talking about with others, and certainly with that person that has dementia. As far as keeping a calm environment, just really reminding yourself as a caregiver, what is the purpose? What is the true goal of the conversations you're having? And is it beneficial for that person with dementia? Visitors, and this is huge. I end up having to talk with families about this every year and kind of reminding our staff, with the holidays coming up, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, even in a facility like Emerald Crest, it really kind of changes the whole kind of feel to our environment that we really promote as being calm, because we tend to have much more people coming and going, whether it's Christmas carols or family visiting. Not last year and a half, it's been a little different because we've had to restrict a lot of that because of COVID. But on a regular year, you have all these different people coming and going and visitors. And again, it's something that our people with dementia are not used to. It really disrupts their normal everyday routine and structure, and it can really throw them and set off that environment. When we talk about keeping a calm environment within the structure, when I'm talking about our environment, I'm talking about the people that are within that environment. I'm really talking about, and this I teach a lot to our caregivers, I'm talking about our Emerald Crest setting. It really includes their room and how their room is set up. It includes the furniture within the house, within their room, knickknacks, even colors. That setting in which that person resides in, you really want to keep it as calm as possible, even with the decorations, even with the colors. At Emerald Crest, if you were to walk into one of those houses, you're not going to see a lot of bright colors or wallpaper that's just kind of really off the wall. You're going to find colors that are very neutral, that are very calming, a lot of blues, beiges, greens. We don't have a lot of crazy wallpaper patterns or carpet patterns. It's all done very much on purpose to try to keep that calm environment and not be overstimulating to that person with dementia. Again, something to think about in whatever setting you are working with that person with dementia. So basically, in a nutshell, calm environments are going to promote calm behaviors, a calm environment, and just a calm day-to-day for that person with dementia. So also, when we're thinking about the holidays, another thing to consider is that need for simplicity, keeping their world, keeping their environment simple. And what I mean by that is, here what I'm showing you again, and you can relate this to any environment that you're working in. Less is always going to be more. And even with the family members at Emerald Crest, when they move their loved one in, a lot of people, they want to bring everything. They want that person to feel at home. They want to bring every possible thing that would maybe make it feel more homey to that person, which is totally understandable. But too much clutter, too many knickknacks, too much clutter on the bathroom sink where you can't even see the sink itself. That's too much for somebody with dementia. Simple really is better. And so this is just showing you some pictures of or examples of rooms. The one on the left used to be a person we cared for at one of our Emerald Crest facilities, and that room was so cluttered that when you would walk into the bathroom, you couldn't even see the toilet. You couldn't even see the sink because there was so much clutter. And we really had to work with family to slowly, in baby steps, try to simplify that environment because she was having all kinds of behaviors. She was agitated, she was paranoid, she wasn't sleeping at night. And as we started to simplify her environment, get her more engaged and out of that room, she started to do a lot better. So it's just kind of showing you different types of rooms. And if Christine, if you want to go to the next slide, like I said, simple is better. And a lot of people may look at this room and say, oh my gosh, it's so bare, it's not homey. Well, this was actually somebody in the late stages of dementia. And by the time you get to the late stage of dementia, you really do want an environment that is very simple like this. A lot of extra furniture, clutter, again, is something that is going to be more of a danger to them. And you really got to think about that too, with the holidays coming up and all the decorations and the Christmas tree and all of that. You know, we still decorate, we still do that stuff at Emerald Crest, but we do it in a very simple way. It's not overwhelming or too much. So this is a big one as we think about the holidays here is and this applies for everybody, but our need for family, our need for that togetherness is very much a need for our residents too, but we have to look at it a little bit differently. So when you're thinking about that need for family at the holidays, a lot of times I want to kind of talk about the caregivers and families, because I think when we go into the holidays with our loved ones with dementia, we start to kind of forget again, they do have dementia. It does mean it's a little different than, say, someone like you or I as a caregiver who, again, is cognitively intact. I think a lot of times we want to go through the holidays like we remember it with mom and dad, how it always was with mom and dad, how it was, what was important to us. And we have to, again, try to step away from those memories that maybe of how it used to be to what is best for our loved one with dementia now. So we have to kind of get away from sometimes our memories or our own needs of what we feel we need at the holiday time. And a lot of times for family members, I see this a lot. It's just getting past our own grief for our loved one that we are essentially kind of losing in a sense as they go through this journey and through their dementia. I think sometimes we want to have the normalcy at the holidays to kind of just get through it and feel better about it. And we have to try to get past that. And again, remember what's best for our loved one with dementia and making sure we have the right support. So when you're thinking about visiting and outings around the holiday times, because, oftentimes we have a lot of visits that are planned, outings that are planned, a lot of holiday functions. Again, when you're wanting to involve your loved one that has dementia, you really need to think about your motivation. What's the motivation behind needing to go to this huge event with 50 some people for the holidays? Is it more for you, or is it something that you think would really be beneficial for that person that has dementia and is more confused and anxious in their everyday life? You got to really think about, again, that person's attention span and duration of how long that actual visit or outing or a holiday event is going to be. And remember when I said earlier in the talk, their attention span is really going to change depending on if they're in the early, middle, or late stages of the dementia process. Somebody that's maybe just in the very early stages and still does live out in the community, maybe they can do a little bit more of these longer activities and multiple activities at the holidays. But if you're thinking you're still going to try to get somebody out that's now well progressed into the middle stages and for sure the late stages, that's going to be really, really tough for that person. I always tell family members, again, I'm coming from a memory care setting, but I always tell our family members, come to them. It's not so much about having to take them out to this family member and that family member and this event and that event, but come to them. And when you do come, don't bring 10, 15, 20 people. Come in just a very small group and for a short amount of time. Any kind of interaction like that, you would be amazed. Your loved one that's going to just, mean the world to them. like I said, plan simple activities. Maybe your Christmas routine every year was to go to church in the morning, and then, you would go and have a brunch, and then you would go to this person's house to open up presents, and then you'd go to the other person's house to have dinner and open up presents, and then you'd end the night with driving around doing or seeing Christmas lights. Well, maybe that's a lot in one day. Maybe you can't do all that. Maybe it's just doing bits and pieces of that and just keeping the day and the events really simple. And really, it's listening to your loved one, regardless of their dementia, listening to them. Oftentimes, whether they can communicate it verbally or not, they will show signs of stress and overload if it's just way too much for them. And it's I think there's a slide where we'll talk about that, but it's really cueing into that. One of the last couple of things to consider around the holidays is that need for activity. And we've talked a lot about that already today, but a lot of people will say, a lot of family members will say to me, what would be good activities to do around the holiday time for my person with dementia or my loved one with dementia? And these are just a few examples. Things that we do a lot of at Emerald Crest is just, very, very simple crafts, holiday crafts. We used to do a lot of Christmas door hangers to put on their doors, just keeping it simple, but still meaningful for them. I always say involving children, and it always works really well. Again, now in a memory care setting, we haven't been able to do this as much with the pandemic, but a lot of times we would involve children coming. We would have children groups that would come, small groups that would come and sing Christmas carols or do a Christmas activity with some of the residents. They always light up. I always say children and pets, they always light up when those groups come along. Music. Any time of year, music is great for somebody with dementia, especially at the holiday time. So again, simple family sing-alongs. That's one thing with dementia, no matter what stage they're in, they tend to remember those familiar songs. I've had people in the late stage who really are not communicating much with words anymore, and all of a sudden you turn on Silent Night or We Wish You a Merry Christmas, and they can sing it word for word. So music is a great thing. Baking, baking a lot of times is great because some of those familiar, smells of the holidays when you're baking cookies or whatever it might be, really can light them up and alert them and bring back some memories. And that's kind of what I mean by the tastes and smells of Christmas. And then we do a lot of this throughout the year, but again, objects for reminiscing. So reminiscing about the holidays and maybe having a box full of very familiar holiday Christmas type objects that you can show them and talk about. And reminiscing is always a good activity too. So just some activities that can come in handy around the holidays. This just, again, is a reminder of when you're doing activities with somebody with dementia, what tends to work the best when you're doing an activity for early, middle, and late stage. So again, early, it can be more reminiscing. It can be more discussion and talking. It can be maybe an hour or so group because they have a longer attention span, 7+ steps. You can do some ongoing things from one day to the next and really giving them a choice, asking them what they would want to do. The middle group, it's not going to be as much as talking. It's going to be more doing. So those sing-alongs, those simple crafts are going to be really important because they maybe can't carry on a conversation like early stage. 20 to 45 minutes, you're going to see like the attention span is going to become less, 3 to 6 steps. If you're going to start a project, you really want to have an end to it so that they feel like they actually completed something. And you're really guiding them in what to do. Do you want to bake chocolate chip cookies or peanut butter cookies today? Kind of guiding them. Late stage, really, it's very, very simple. It's more about alerting the senses. So a lot of those baking groups and cooking groups, the smells, the music groups, the sing-alongs, huge. 5 to 15 minutes, really, really short, just short little type of activities is what's going to work because they can't attend for long periods of time. And it's really just, when you're making the Christmas cookies, it's more about them being able to eat the cookie than anything. And it's you kind of deciding what will be done. So that's just kind of a brief rundown of what an activity might look like or what you might want to consider depending on what stage the person's at. So last thing here, things to consider at the holiday times, and I kind of brought it up briefly, is the need for help navigating stress. And it's not only the stress of our loved ones with dementia, but it can be really stressful for us as caregivers too. So, if something is too much, or it's getting too overwhelming or too overstimulating for somebody with dementia, these holiday activities, there's a lot of even nonverbal type things that they will do. Things you'll see just in their body language. You might see a person start to wring their hands more if they're at an event or at a family gathering, if it's too much, shifting in their seat from one foot to another, increased rate of breathing, somebody, kind of breathing faster, shorter breath. You might see a red or flushed face, increased pacing about the environment, increased volume. They might get louder. Intrusiveness with others, and then just more repetitive questions. I'll never forget many years ago, and again pre-COVID, when we had one of our family resident holiday parties at one of our sites years ago. A lot of times we'll have an entertainer come in and sing Christmas songs along with our event, and we had a gentleman who was singing at one of our family resident holiday parties, and there was a resident sitting in the back in a recliner, and nobody really picked up on it. But as the man was singing and playing the songs, this gentleman in the back was his face was starting to get more flushed. He was started to kind of pound his foot on the ground. He was shifting his weight. Nobody really picked up on it. There was a lot of commotion, of course, going on in the house with the party. And this man eventually got up and went up to the entertainer and kind of hit at him, and ended up hitting his microphone out of his hand. It was his way of saying, "I'm stressed, all this commotion, all these people gathering, it's too much." But he wasn't able to verbally say that. And unfortunately, nobody really picked up on that. So they had to kind of gently guide him away, get him to his room into a quiet area, and help to calm him down. But that's the kind of things that can happen if somebody that has dementia is just too overwhelmed or stressed by everything going on at the holidays, or just in general. So what are they trying to tell us? That's really what it comes down to, is if you see these type of behaviors of stress and overload, are they trying to just tell us, is it too much? There's not enough going on. I need more structure. I need more guidance. I have a basic need that's unmet. Maybe the person has to go to the bathroom and they can't say that, and they're getting agitated by it. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe they're hot. Maybe they're cold. Whatever it has to do with. Maybe there's just a need that they can't express. Maybe the activity that they're involved in at the holidays, or just in general, maybe it's too hard. They can't do it. Maybe they need a break. They don't understand. A lot of times we see those type of behaviors when the person just is not understanding what's happening, what's going on. And then, when you're to that point and you see those kind of triggers or signs, maybe it's just time to abort the mission, and maybe we just call it quits for the day for that person. So some final tips for trying to get through the holidays and having an enjoyable and successful holiday with your loved one is, and I tell families this a lot just in their everyday too, is if you're going to do an activity with them or bring them out for an event, the earlier you can do your activities, your events, the earlier you can do them in the day, the better. Because as the day goes on, it gets later in the day, with dementia, they start to be more confused. They start to become more tired, agitated, and just trying to do all kinds of different activities and events is going to be that much harder. Whatever you do for the holidays, if you can maintain what would be their regular or normal daily schedule as much as possible, is going to be the best. So if they're used to eating meals at certain times, try to, with your holiday celebrations, plan those meals kind of around the same time. If they're used to doing activities or resting at a certain time, plan the activities and the rest time around those similar times. Try to keep to their schedule. If you're visiting someone, again, don't bring a huge group. Really keep it minimal, 1 to 4 visitors at a time. And always have a backup plan. It's just like with young kids, you know, you have this plan, this great plan that you have in place for the day. Well, you know, there's a lot of things that can backfire, and that's the same with somebody with dementia. So always have a backup plan if it just doesn't work. This is huge. You really have to, as a caregiver, adjust your expectations. It might not be able to look like the holidays of the past that you remember. Again, remember their attention span. You don't want to have hour upon hour long activities. It might just be, you know, a 45-minute to an hour type of activity, and then, you know, you bring them home, or you're done for the day. Less is more, and again, simple is better. Last but not least, I get this question a lot from family members as they are thinking about gifts for the holidays. For somebody with dementia, this a lot of times is kind of the standard things I recommend for family members that can be beneficial for somebody with dementia is, you know, blankets, bedspreads are always come in handy, and our residents, they always love the warm fuzzy blankets. A new pillow or body pillow always is handy. Scrapbooking, so creating a scrapbook for that person of their travels, of their hobbies, of their interests, and you know, just labeling photo albums or scrapbooks. It's a great way to reminisce with them. Clothing, you know, I always recommend, you know, new clothing for the upcoming season if they're running low. Socks are always handy, I think, for anybody. And then just simple grooming type gift ideas. Lotions are always good. Lip balm, because you know, where it's always so dry, especially here in Minnesota, for the ladies. And, you know, any new nail polish or makeup can always come in handy. So those are just, again, some general ideas that I think are helpful. And that kind of brings us to the end of our holiday tips for caregiver presentation. If there's any questions, I think Christine usually takes those at this time.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. Great information. If there are any questions, you can go ahead in the chat room, and we can just have some questions in there, and I'll repeat them and just see if we can follow up with those. If we don't have any questions, we'll just end here in a couple minutes, but let's just give a minute or two here for anybody who might have some questions. I don't have questions, but I definitely have some thank yous to Jenny, and Jennifer and Margot both said it was very helpful and informative, so that's great to hear. I always say when there's no questions, that means we covered all our bases. But if there are any questions, if you think of anything down the road, my email is there. You're welcome to email me, and I can pass it on to Jenny, and we can respond that way. I will have handouts, and we'll put a video of this presentation on our website probably within the next week or so, and I will email it out to everybody who signed up for this. So if you found it useful and you want to share it with other family members, you'll be able to do that. I'm also looking for any other topics for us to provide on future presentations like this. So if you have any ideas or have a topic that you wish you could get more information on, I'd appreciate an email on that as well. Because you guys a lot of times are the ones that are, well, you're living what's going on and have that information need, and I'd be happy to look at some different topics and get some speakers on that. So All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining, and I do hope you have a wonderful holiday. Hopefully you can use some of these tips to make it very successful. And please be careful out there. It is very slippery, but have a great rest of the day and happy holidays. And thanks again, Jenny, for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.